For over 45 years, Dr. Joseph L. White has enjoyed a distinguished career in the field of psychology and mental health as a teacher, mentor, administrator, clinical supervisor, writer, consultant, and practicing psychologist. He is currently Professor Emeritus of Psychology and Psychiatry at the University of California, Irvine, where he spent most of his career as a teacher, supervising psychologist, and Director of Ethnic Studies and Cross-Cultural Programs. Dr. White received his PhD in clinical psychology from Michigan State University in 1961. Dr. White is the author of numerous papers and several books, including The Psychology of Blacks, An African American Perspective. His most recent book is Black Fathers, An Invisible Presence in America. In 1970, he wrote a seminal article in Ebony magazine entitled Toward a Black Psychology, which was instrumental in beginning the modern era of African American and ethnic psychology. I began my interview by asking Dr. White, can we apply the traditional concepts of personality theory to the experience of African American persons, or do these concepts, which are so embedded in white Eurocentric worldviews, invite distortion?
I would say that we can't apply the concepts of Euro-American personality theory to black psychology. And my rationale is that personality theories in America emerged from three traditions. They emerged from the psychoanalytic tradition, they emerged from the behavioristic tradition, and from the humanistic condition of Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. And in those theories, which emerged from traditional psychology, those personality theories, blacks were, for the most part, absent, invisible. We were not part of a personality theory. You could read a book on personality theory up until the 1980s almost, and there'd be no mention of blacks, Negroes, colored people. And the other piece is that when we were occasionally mentioned in those traditional theories, we were mentioned in a deficit deficiency manner, that there was something wrong with us, that we were impulse-ridden, we were oversexed, we couldn't delay gratification, and we couldn't do a complex task requiring intellectual power. And many prominent psychologists took that position. Henry Garrett, who was at one time president of the American Psych Association, and who testified against the desegregation decision of Kenneth Clark and Thurgood Marshall, Robert Yerkes, Lewis Terman, Henry Goddard, prominent psychologists, in fact testified before the Armed Services Committee of the United States Congress that we should not be trained to be pilots, things that required complex skills. So that was the psychology of the first 80 years in America.
And you and your colleagues helped change that?
Right, that we had two goals when we started out. One was we wanted to challenge the existing absence of images and the deficit deficiency model. On the one hand, we wanted to challenge where psychology and traditional personality theorists were, and on the other hand, we wanted to build a strength-based psychology of black folks from their perspective. So we wanted them to tell us what were the themes, the psychological themes in the black experience.
So part of examining that was to step out of the existing theories, and I've heard you talk about getting into the community and understanding the people from their own perspective.
Right, we did not want to build a theory from the Ivy Tower because we thought that was what went wrong in psychology. So we wanted to go down to the people in the community, be part of them, and we didn't know words like ethnology, but that's what they told us we were doing. So we would go to funerals, dances, weddings, parties, talk to people on street corners, and again, we were saying over and over again, what are the recurring psychological themes?
And those themes were strength-based and resiliency. What did you find?
So when we went out there looking for these strength-based themes, the question was, black people had in fact survived. 400 years in America, 250 years of slavery, 150 years of deficiency, 150 years of de jure and de facto segregation. Up to 1965 when we started. So we said, okay, what enabled you all to survive? That was the question. And that's when we came out with the 7 themes of improvisation, resilience, connectedness to others, spirituality, emotional vitality, gallows humor, and a healthy suspicion of white folks. And then I spelled those out in a kind of different way in both of those books, but it's also on that DVD I gave you.
And then finally, the source of strength. That is the most important thing. Internalizing the African American core strengths, and there are 7. Please write for me. 7 African American psychological strengths that have carried us through these 400 years in this foreign land. And these 7 strengths are improvisation, resilience is number 2, resilience. Number 3 is connectedness to others. Number 4 is spirituality. Number 5 is emotional vitality. Number 6 is a gallows like hanging gallows, a gallows sense of humor, gallows humor. And number 7 is a healthy suspicion of white folks. Now, in your curriculums that you are teaching these young boys and guiding them through school and in scouts and in mentorship, big brothers, prevention programs, this is what you want them to internalize. Now, let's walk through them real quickly in the time I have available. Improvisation. If you live in a country which has a history of not giving you an equal range of choices, and you want an equal range of choices, then you got to improvise. You got to be imaginative, you got to be creative, you got to be innovative. You remember that old song by Gladys Knight and the Pips? I got to use my imagination to make the best of a bad situation and keep on keeping on. All right? My mama used to improvise. She would wait out at the market at 6 o'clock when that market closed. The man would give her 4 steak bones. And she would come home, put those steak bones in a pot. We had preserves up in the closet there. Get some preserves out there, dump little vegetables, potatoes in there, cut up a few wieners, and baby, we had stew for dinner. Not only to feed her 3 children, but to feed my cousin and everybody else who wandered into the house, because my mama was not going to let nobody leave her house hungry. Now, hungry is different from hungry. Hungry is when your 15-year-old daughter is laying up on the couch watching color TV, talking about, Mama, please go get me a Big Mac. That's hungry. Hungry is when you never had enough to eat during the Big Depression. That's hungry. Y'all know what hungry is. Resilience is the ability to recover from a setback. There is no way in this world, on God's green earth, a black male is going to go from 0 to 70 without having a setback. Failure is built in. Defeat is built in. The question is, can you get back up after a setback? Can you get back up after a setback and keep on keeping on? People talk about heal. People talk about closure. I've heard y'all use words like restoration. I say the goal is to heal and to become stronger in the broken places, to become stronger in the broken places. In the black community, psychological maturity cannot be achieved until you have paid your dues and become stronger in the broken places. You're never going to be the same after divorce. You're never going to be the same after violence. You're never going to be the same after death. The question is, can you incorporate that and grow stronger? Y'all been running around here putting the bad mouth on Marion Barry. Now, Marion Barry got caught up in a hotel room on national TV. He had a crack pipe in his mouth, and he was with a woman other than his wife on national TV. White folks said, oh, ain't that a shame? Ain't that terrible? He's up there smoking that crack with a woman other than his wife. We ought to put him away forever. Marion Barry fell down by the side of God. Remembered all them prayers his mother used to pray in a small church at Ida Betta, Mississippi. Said, if a man fall by the side of God, he shall rise again. I have never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed beg bread. And got up off of it and became mayor again in D.C. And white people said, oh, how could you elect such a terrible man? This and that and other. I said, look here, a boy came back from defeat and he became stronger in the broken places. And if you develop a therapy that can help people become stronger in the broken places, you will become the greatest counselor of the 21st century. Stronger in the broken places. All right? Connectedness. We already talked about that. Spirituality. Black folks believe in soul power, S-O-U-L. S-O-U-L, soul power. That there is a life-affirming force that permeates the universe, that gives meaning and inspiration from all things. From the darkest days of slavery, we always believed that we would be delivered. We used to have a little old thing my grandmother told me about called a ring shout. They used to walk around in those little old churches in a concentric circle, counterclockwise, walk around, and they'd be hollering and screaming, and the drum would be beating, boom, 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 be walking, shouting, hollering, crying, and pretty soon those tears and pain would give way to shouts of joy. Deliverance. And just as Daniel was delivered from the lion's den and Jonah from the body of the whale, if you keep the faith, you will be delivered in this world. And the Lord is not going to give you no more than what you can bear. The Lord knows how much you can bear, and you will be tested in this life. Believe me, just as he tested Job, you'll be running around here talking about, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus, oh, Jesus is going to test your ass. You will get tested. Now, the question again is, can you come back? Emotional vitality. You want to see black emotional vitality? You go to a dance club over here in North Philly tonight. And man, I don't care how many bills people owe, how much their boyfriend left them, how much they don't have no job. As soon as they hit that club, boy. Now, I don't know if they teach dance therapy at the University of Pennsylvania or at Penn State. And you know something? Black dances are copied all over the world. A dance will develop in North Philly tonight. It'll be in San Francisco next week and in Japan the following week. And God is my witness, because my youngest daughter, I've got 3 daughters, my youngest daughter is a geologist, and she goes all over the world looking for oil up under the ocean and some discipline called micropaleontology. I don't know what that is, but I know they be looking for oil. So a little old girl, she ain't but 5'1", she went over to Japan, on the Sea of Japan, looking for some oil. So she told me she was going to go to Tokyo and ride the subway. I said, well, sugar, you know, maybe you ought not to be riding no subway around there. You don't speak Japanese. She told me, I'm a woman of the 21st century. I said, well, go ahead on then, if that's what you want. Go ahead on. So the poor little old sister got lost over there in Tokyo. So sister heard some music coming out of a club, and it sounded like some San Francisco boogaloo music, you know what I mean? So she went on in the club, and here was these Japanese youngsters from Japan dancing like sisters and brothers from the Fillmore District in San Francisco or 7th Street over in West Oakland. What do you think about that? So the music had a common language, they all dancing together, and then they took her back to the ship. Ain't no big thing, right? And finally, you've got to develop a gallows sense of humor. You got to laugh and cry as you go through this world. Now, when you have cried your eyes out, and the worst tragedy you ever experienced, and all the tears are out, then there ain't nothing to do but stand back and laugh and say to hell with it and go on about your business. Now, the last thing is a healthy suspicion of white folks don't believe everything they say. Thank you.
And we also say that these 7 themes might be important for Euro-Americans, but I try to stay out of Euro-Americans' business. I think they will be. As we begin to move through building this psychology, we also begin to challenge a couple of other themes that were existing in traditional psychology, and that was the theme of linear development, that one stage builds on another and another and another, and in a kind of an age flow. And we said no, the basic themes of psychology repeat in a cyclical fashion throughout the lifespan. So if you take Erickson, for example, trust and mistrust does not end in infancy, it goes through the lifespan. Intimacy does not begin and end in young adulthood, it goes through the lifespan. And so that you come through the loop at deeper and deeper levels.
Right. So again, lifespan development is a concept that you have been writing about for a long time and has been adopted into mainstream psychology, but it has some roots in the work that you've done with your colleagues.
Right, and the whole idea of a strength-based psychology now is coming back through the door with the positive psychology. And people are finally saying that in order to move toward wellness and healthy living, it's important to have your strengths working for you. So a therapist has to come to a point where he ceases depathologizing the patient and beginning to look at the person's strengths, or helping them develop some strengths.
And their adaptation and their ability to move on.
Right, and utilize those in their daily living rather than continuing the depathologizing process.
In what I just heard you say was that importance of defining yourself. That if you leave your defining of yourself to Freud and Ellis and Alport and McRae and Costa, then the danger, not all the time, but the danger is that they'll define anything that's different as lesser than.
Yeah, they'll jump into a pathology model, and what has happened since that time is, a thread that's running through psychology now is that if a person has not experienced the world that they're attempting to define, they are going to make some errors because they won't have an accurate lens. So it's like women saying that when men define them, they define them as passive, over-emotional, upset during certain times of the month, unstable, and so forth, unstable. But they had never had the experience of being a female. So that we're saying that in order to be a good scientist, you also have to have some direct experience with the population that you're working with from their perspective, not from your own. You know, so like if I was to go to sit with the Alaskan Eskimos, it would be important that I see them from their perspective rather than taking my own stuff up there. Let me pick on psychiatry this time.
Okay.
Not psychology enough. In 1851, a psychiatrist, a white psychiatrist in Louisiana, wrote an article in which he used the term drapetomania. Drapetomania. It's in Bob Guthrie's book. His name was Samuel Cartwright. And this drapetomania was a psychological disorder of runaway slaves. So that if a slave ran away, he had this mental illness. And why would he run away from a good master and this and that? And we saw drapetomania as an example of self-determination, that here was the slave taking charge of his life. So again, it's two different lenses. They're seeing the slave as sick with the drapetomania and nervous disease, and we're seeing this as an act of self-determination. So that again, that this was built into the American culture, and then people who grew up in America, even though they went to medical school or psychological training, came out subconsciously with those same views.
So it's a good example where a diversity of perspective, but somebody's got to say, hey, wait a minute, let's think about this another way. You know, and for so long, psychology was a male-dominated profession, and that we saw women as lesser than. And then they've got more of a voice to say, wait a minute, you know, there are some advantages to the feminist perspective.
And there may well be, in science, we've always said there's one ultimate and truthful reality. Well, there may be, when we come to social psychology, there may be multiple realities. And it may be that we're going to have to find common ground within those multiple realities. What fascinated me in psychology was in that first course when they begin to explain the functioning of the mind, both the defense mechanisms and then the pairing and association. So when I saw Pavlov's dog and they rang that bell and he started to salivate, then I saw in my mind, you say bad things about black people to white kids growing up, then they see a black person and all of a sudden, bam, everything comes true. This person is X, Y, Z, dumb, oversexed, might attack you on the elevator, so forth and so on. You know, but that's because of the social conditioning.
Right.
Then the other part was the mind, as Freud laid it out, conscious, subconscious, unconscious, and the defense mechanism. And so something can be staring somebody straight in the face. And I used to think that they were just lying. But now I realize in that psych class that they couldn't see it because something was preventing them from seeing it.
And it was unconscious.
Yeah.
The defense mechanisms were
Yeah,
unconscious.
and they were automatically working.
Yeah.
And I said, man, and that whole thing fascinated me.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really respect about your work is that you didn't then pathologize what was different from the black experience, and, you know, which had been, we talked about how that had been done to the black experience, but that you didn't, it seems like you describe that and say, you can have what you want from this, and, you know, take the ideas of strength-based, you know, whatever works for you, but we are